Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. The nightly ritual of bathing my twin boys, Philip and Charles, both 5 years old, followed by bedtime stories, had just wrapped up. My wife, Sabrina, and I usually alternated bath duties, but I often volunteered for story time. The boys adored how I animated the characters with my voice, and honestly, I treasured those moments. Snuggled between them, surrounded by their warmth, I cherished the chance to give them my undivided attention. Since they hadn't learned to read yet, I occasionally improvised, weaving in details from our day or gentle moral lessons based on their behavior. But they were quick-witted and frequently caught my deviations, prompting me to return to the original narrative. That night, Charles had already succumbed to sleep, and Philip was drifting in and out. The tranquility was so soothing that I closed my eyes for what felt like a moment, but awoke 2 hours later. Carefully, I lifted Philip and settled him into his bed, kissed both boys goodnight, and returned Huckleberry Finn to the shelf. I switched off the light and quietly descended the stairs. Reaching the first floor, I noticed the kitchen light was on, which puzzled me because I distinctly remembered turning it off before heading upstairs. Intrigued, I walked toward the kitchen. Sabrina had gone out with her friends, a routine she'd recently picked up again. They were former colleagues from a job she left to become a stay-at-home mom after the boys were born. Having returned to part-time work, she'd rekindled monthly gatherings with them. Oddly, I hadn't heard the garage door, which was unusual. The mystery unraveled when I heard soft sobbing. Entering the kitchen, I froze. Sabrina sat at the table, an open bottle of Jack Daniels beside her, a half-empty glass of bourbon, and a pile of crumpled napkins. Her normally tidy hair was tousled, and as she lifted her tear-streaked face, I sensed something was gravely wrong. Her face bore the raw signs of distress, smudged mascara and lipstick, her expression slack from both sorrow and intoxication, which was rare for her. Fresh tears spilled as she clutched the table, sobbing uncontrollably. Alarmed, I did the only thing that felt right. I pulled out a chair, sat beside her, and gently rubbed her back. "Sabrina, what's wrong? Are you hurt?" I asked softly. She shook her head, unable to form words through her sobs. Unsure of how to comfort her, I turned her toward me, wrapping her in an embrace, but it only made her cry harder. I stood up, holding her close until her crying eased slightly. "Are you sure you're not hurt?" I whispered. "No," she mumbled faintly. "What can I do to help?" She shook her head again. Then, without warning, she burped, releasing a harsh, acrid smell. Before I could react, she vomited on both of us. It wasn't much, but the odor was overpowering. I stayed by her side until she was done. Realizing she might have been sick elsewhere, I focused on cleaning us up. Sabrina, petite at under 100 pounds, was easy for me to carry compared to my 220-pound frame. I lifted her and took her to the bathroom. Steadying her shaky legs, I began undressing her. Her blouse was missing several buttons, so I tossed it into the shower, intending to rinse it later. She wore the expensive Versus bra I'd given her for our 5th anniversary, now with a broken strap. I unclasped it, freeing her clammy skin. Then I removed her skirt, garter belt, stockings, and thong before stripping off my soiled clothes. I adjusted the water temperature, rinsed Sabrina off, and sat her gently on the shower floor, letting the spray cascade over her. Thankfully, the shower had a detachable hose, left by the previous owners for washing their dog, which I used to rinse our clothes while keeping an eye on her. After a thorough rinse, I helped her stand, washed us both with body wash, and dried her off. Normally, showering together was intimate, but not that night. Too many questions weighed heavily on my mind. Once dry, I sat her on the toilet while I dealt with the wet clothes. Though she seemed half asleep, I heard her urinate, which reassured me she wasn't dehydrated. I dried her again, carried her to bed, and tucked her in. After changing into fresh clothes, I checked on the kids and returned downstairs to clean the kitchen. I added ice to the bourbon glass, corked the bottle, and sat down, trying to piece everything together. Her phone seemed the logical place to start. She'd changed her password, but after a few guesses, I unlocked it. Most recent texts were from friends checking if she got home safely. That prompted me to check the garage. Her car was missing, explaining the silence from the garage door. Then I saw a recent message from someone named Andrew Parker. It was an apology, hoping his actions hadn't been misunderstood. Intrigued, I scrolled through their conversation history. Weeks of flirty exchanges surfaced, nothing overtly incriminating but enough to suggest mutual interest. They discussed plans for a bachelorette party, mentioning clubs and the appeal of certain men. It seemed Sabrina's social circle had expanded to include male colleagues and acquaintances. After reading through the threads, I checked on Sabrina and the boys again. They were asleep, blankets kicked off. As I covered Sabrina with a sheet, I couldn't help but admire her beauty, still radiant after 2 children. Yet beneath that admiration lurked a gnawing uncertainty about our future. I barely slept. The next morning I woke her around 9. She shot up, panicked. "Oh my God, I'm late for work." "I called in for both of us. Your mom will watch the kids, handle daycare drop-off and pickup." "Does she know why?" "Yes. I told her we need to understand why you got drunk and acted recklessly." "Oh my God. Why would you say that?" "Because it's the truth. By the end of today, we'll either be talking about a divorce or addressing what led to last night." "Divorce? What are you talking about?" "I can explain." "I hope so. I'd love to hear how your blouse lost its buttons, how your anniversary bra got torn, and why you wore lingerie to work. Breakfast is ready. I expect answers. Also, I read your messages and emails." Before leaving the room, I added, "Mouthwash is in the bathroom. Your breath's rough. Aspirin's in the cabinet. You'll need it." 10 minutes later, she joined me, dressed in her usual lounge clothes, snug yoga pants, and an oversized sweatshirt. She looked fragile, moving gingerly, her headache evident. I had laid out toast, English muffins, bacon, coffee, and juice. She picked at the toast with mustard, an old hangover remedy, and sipped her coffee in silence. Her phone, laptop, and tablet were stacked neatly in front of me. I waited for her to start talking. She finally met my eyes, her voice soft and fragile. "Thank you for breakfast, sweetheart, and for looking after me last night. My memory's a bit blurry after all those drinks, but when I woke up to the scent of damp clothes, I realized I'd created quite a mess. For both of us. I'm so sorry. You've always taken such good care of me and the boys. I honestly don't know what I'd do without you." I shot back, "Let's hope you never have to find out," my sarcasm slipping past unnoticed as Sabrina kept talking. "I was out with the girls from work, you know. We went to Carson's since they have those Wednesday dance nights. You know how much I love to dance. Anyway, some guys kept sending drinks our way, and I was in a celebratory mood after that big raise. I guess I went overboard." She paused, shaking her head slightly as if trying to clear the fog. It was weird. One moment I was just buzzed and having a blast, and the next, I was completely wasted. My feet are still sore from the heels, so I must have danced a lot. I vaguely remember some kind of argument with a guy. Then nothing, just flashes until someone was helping me up the stairs, unlocking the door with my keys. I found this note in my purse this morning. The note read, "Sabrina Wilson. We found your address in your purse and made sure you got home safely from our club. Your car is secure in our parking lot. You can pick it up in the morning. My wife Claire drove you back because you were too intoxicated to manage alone. One of your dance partners became aggressive, and your blouse was torn in the process. You were quite out of control, so we thought it best to get you home safely. Your partner resisted, and our bouncer had to step in. You might want to seek professional help. Tony Carson." After reading it, I commented dryly, "Looks like the Carsons really had your back. You owe them big." Sabrina nodded silently, gathering her thoughts. "So here's what we know. You went to Carson's with the girls, danced, drank too much, and ended up so out of it that the club owner's wife had to drive you home." She nodded again, quietly processing. Then I added, "But I have a question. Who is Andrew Parker? And when did you start seeing him?" Her eyes went wide. "I told you. I read all your emails and texts. I'm not seeing him. I'm married to you. Andrew's new in sales. And the girls thought it'd be fun if I flirted with him to get him to join the dance competition this week. All the single girls are crazy about him. And what about the married ones? I pressed. Not me, she insisted firmly. Then why flirt at all? Like I said, the girls asked me to. I think he mentioned finding me attractive to one of them, and they thought it would help convince him. I was just doing it for them. So you were doing them a favor? I countered. She didn't respond. And what about the anniversary lingerie from Versus? That's usually reserved for our special nights. Why wear it out with the girls? It makes me feel confident, she admitted softly. The girls had this silly contest and they joked I was too old to compete. I guess I wanted to prove them wrong. Tell me about the contest. It was dumb. You earned points based on how often you were asked to dance and how attractive your partners were. I don't even know the exact scoring. I got drunk quicker than I planned and danced a lot. I might have even won because guys kept coming back. Then it all blurred. Someone tore my blouse. There was pushing, grabbing, and suddenly I was crying. Do you think someone spiked your drink? Maybe. But it's probably too late to tell now. What bothers me is all the flirty messages and how you let strange men touch you. That doesn't sound like a faithful wife. Sabrina fell silent, then spoke softly. I understand why you feel that way, but I swear I haven't cheated and I never intended to. Dancing, it's different. Any woman will tell you that men get aroused while dancing. It's just how it is. I always shut it down, except with you. Last night was a mistake. I was trying to prove something stupid to those women at work. I got drunk, lost control, and I am deeply sorry. I sighed. One more thing. Before we had the boys, we were intimate almost every night. You said we had to slow down because it affected you at work. You even wore pads daily. But now you don't? Not really. Only after my period sometimes. I pulled out a Ziploc bag from under the table. Then why was this in your thong last night? It's damp from the shower, but there's no blood. Simple. The thong chafes. The pad cushions the lace. I wanted to believe her. One last question. Your friends seem to think dancing intimately isn't cheating. Do you see it that way? In some ways, yes, she whispered. Then would it be okay if I joined a guys group that buys drinks for women and dances closely with them? She shook her head, eyes downcast. No. What if your dad and I went to Carson's after bowling to watch bachelorette parties? Tears filled her eyes again as she grabbed a tissue, sobbing. I get it, Louis. I'm so ashamed. If you did that, it would crush me. I'd kick you out and never forgive you. It would feel like a betrayal of our marriage. I guess that makes me a hypocrite because I'm here begging for your forgiveness. Please don't leave me. I made a horrible mistake. I love you more than I can say. Let me prove it to you. I gave her a moment, then spoke quietly. So, next New Year's Eve, when Sophia, our overly friendly neighbor, gets drunk and handsy, I can't let her touch me, right? No, she whispered. If you grant me the chance to stay, she'll be mine. Why not come over and lay your heart bare? She swiftly circled the table, landing effortlessly in my lap. Her arms wrapped around my neck, eyes locking with mine as she confessed. Louis, my love, I got tangled in a reckless, childish mistake, and someone exploited that. I accept whatever punishment you deem fit. Only you can set things right. Is that so? I'll think about it. Trusting my instincts, I held her gaze and replied, Sabrina, I want to believe you. No more games with other men. Now let's see if everything is as it should be. Yes, my husband, please. After our passionate reunion, we rested in silence, bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun. My fingers traced the familiar curves of the woman I cherished. Pulling her close, I whispered, I've always seen this place as our sanctuary, and it hurts to think of anyone else crossing those lines, doing things meant only for us. I've forgiven your mistakes, but the image lingers. Only you can help me replace it with something better. Do you understand? Of course, darling, she murmured. You are my everything. Every part of me belongs to you, to treasure whenever you wish. By the time we dressed for dinner, the painful memories had already begun to fade, replaced by new ones of her raw, unguarded beauty. After fulfilling her final longing and watching her catch her breath, she whispered, Thank you, Louis, for standing by me despite my foolishness. I hope to show you the same trust you've given me. I love you more than words can express. Just promise me one thing, no more dance competitions. She giggled softly. Smart Alec. All right. Here's the plan for the rest of the day. I'm running on fumes right now, but tonight I'll be recharged. I'll carry this anticipation with me. You'll hear from me, big guy. Later, even though Sabrina was nursing a mild headache, we enjoyed a pleasant lunch and drove to Carson's to retrieve her car. The shop was closed, but we rang the bell at the back reserved for deliveries. Mrs. Carson answered, Well, if it isn't the dancing queen, how's your head today? Not too bad. Luckily, I'm married to the best man alive. He took care of me and forgave my foolishness. You're lucky. We've seen other girls in similar situations, and we suspect Andrew Guy's been tampering with drinks. Haven't caught him yet, but we're keeping an eye out. Thank you for watching out for my wife, I said sincerely. Let me know if I can help. Just spread the word about Carson's. That evening, we picked up the kids from her mother's house, assured her everything was fine, and ordered pizza. We bathed the little ones together, spinning a fairy tale where we starred as Prince Charming and Sleeping Beauty. The kids loved it, except for the kiss, ironically, which I thought was the best part. After tucking them in, we escaped to our master bathroom for another shared shower. This one lingered longer, filled with gentle, loving touches. Epilogue. 3 months later, in a dimly lit bar across town, a tall, rugged man slid onto a stool beside a sharply dressed stranger. You Andrew? The one everyone talks about? Sam Houston sends his regards. You know Sam? Yeah, we go way back. He mentioned you've perfected some special cocktail additive, undetectable in tests. Rumors, maybe, but it's not cheap. How much? About $150 a bottle, good for 3 doses. If you've got some, meet me in the back lot in 5. No cameras there. Heard Parker got messed up pretty bad. Yeah? Found naked in a dumpster, mauled beyond recognition. They had to put in a tube so he could urinate, but he's done with women for good. Ironically, they left his manhood intact, so he'll still feel desire, just never act on it. Serves him right. Always was a bastard. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you. Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. At least I still had my dignity, Your Honor. The words left my mouth, and I immediately caught my lawyer's sharp inhale, his sideways glare speaking volumes. For someone commanding such an exorbitant fee, I'd expected him to maintain a more unflappable demeanor. He had tirelessly advised, no, implored, me to abandon that particular line, arguing it would erode any goodwill I might hope to earn. Public sympathy, he said, could sway the judge toward a more favorable decision. But there was something my highly paid counsel didn't grasp. From my seat in the dock, I had a clear view of the judge. The first time I'd uttered that phrase, I noticed the faintest hint of a smirk on his face. It disappeared quickly, replaced by a glance toward my supposed victim at the other table, his eyes brimming with contempt. I wasn't alone in finding the man intolerable. May I confer with my client again, Your Honor? My lawyer asked, desperation seeping into his voice. You're welcome to try, Mr. Perkins, the judge replied, his tone laced with dry humor, though cooperation doesn't appear to be his strong suit. He aimed a wry grin at me as Perkins leaned in for yet another round of pleading whispers. I had little affection for Perkins. Slick and condescending, he was the antithesis of the kind of person I'd willingly hire. But the choice hadn't been mine. Perkins had been a gift from my closest friend, Buck. Was Buck some wealthy benefactor throwing money at my legal troubles? Far from it. He lived as humbly as I had before my life was derailed by this courtroom saga. Yet Buck had masterminded a wildly successful GoFundMe campaign to cover my legal expenses. And somehow, this preening attorney came with the package. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same public disgust directed at the man I'd assaulted had fueled my legal defense. His failed attempt to crowdfund his own cause only highlighted his unpopularity. Meanwhile, I was flooded with letters of support and hailed as a folk hero. As I'd reminded everyone, with varying levels of tact, I still had my pride. Perkins let out a heavy sigh, shot me a final imploring look, and returned to his seat, visibly defeated. The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Ulrich, your attorney is correct. The victim deserves more respect than you've shown." Yet from my angle, I caught the twinkle in his eye, an expression betraying a different sentiment entirely. "My apologies, Your Honor. I was just stating facts. I have a pair of testicles. The man who seduced my wife, however, does not, unless he keeps them preserved somewhere." The judge's face darkened momentarily, then relaxed. It was clearly time for me to stop talking. "As I was saying, Mr. Ulrich," the judge resumed, "you've pled guilty to assault causing bodily harm, an offense carrying a maximum sentence of 8 years. I'd strongly advise against repeating your infamous remarks." His gaze shifted toward the prosecution table, where my victim sat flushed and fuming. "Understood, Your Honor," I replied, unusually compliant. The judge continued, "Your lawyer has argued temporary insanity as a mitigating factor. The court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, however, suggests you're of sound mind. The psychiatrist did note that temporary insanity can sometimes manifest as a reflexive response to extreme stimuli." I nodded, keeping quiet. "We've reviewed the victim's impact statement. Before sentencing, I'd like to hear your version of events one last time." Taking a deep breath, I began. "Of course, Your Honor." My eyes drifted to the gallery, where my wife sat with her head bowed. She'd avoided my initial testimony, likely to spare herself the embarrassment. Today, she had no such escape. Whether she endured the shame or fled the courtroom, any chance of reconciliation was long dead. The memory of that night was as sharp as ever. It started innocently. My wife and I were out with friends at a bar. We were enjoying the evening until he arrived, the so-called victim. He didn't even acknowledge me before asking my wife to dance. It annoyed me, but I let it go. She danced with him a few times and came back to our table. Everything seemed fine until she vanished later in the evening. I paused to gather myself. The betrayal still stung. I found out she'd left with him. Guessing he'd taken her to his place, I drove there. His car was in the garage, the door wide open. Even the side door to the house was unlocked. I didn't break in. I simply walked inside. "That detail is corroborated by the police report," the judge interjected. "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. Once inside, my memory gets hazy. I remember feeling angrier with every step as I searched the house. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard noises coming from an upstairs bedroom. From there, it's all a blur. My next clear memory is the police arriving. Whether the images in my head are real or the product of questioning, I honestly don't know. The judge studied me carefully. My lawyer had built a case around the idea that I'd been coerced into confessing while mentally unfit. There were discrepancies in the police's account of my time in custody, and my lawyer claimed they'd exploited my vulnerable state to implant false memories. But I remembered everything, every vivid, agonizing detail. The sounds had led me to an open bedroom door. Inside, I saw them, my wife, naked and willingly engaged with him. There was no hesitation or coercion. Her enthusiasm shattered any illusions I might have clung to. Humiliation turned to rage. I don't recall deciding to act. I only knew I could never rival him in some ways, but I could settle the score in others. Years of rugby had given me strength and precision, and I delivered a kick that ensured he'd never forget me. The aftermath was chaos. My wife hit her head against the headboard as he collapsed forward, clutching his groin and screaming in agony. The image of his horrified face as he realized the extent of his injury would remain with me, a small consolation no matter the outcome of this trial. Your actions, Mr. Ulrich, resulted in the surgical removal of the victim's testicles, the judge said, his tone measured. While you administered first aid, the severity of the assault is undeniable. That your wife didn't witness the critical moment is irrelevant. The evidence leaves no doubt. The crux of the matter lies in your state of mind at the time of the incident. As I previously stated, the standard punishment for this crime is an 8-year prison term. However, I have the discretion to take into account the extreme provocation you faced and the psychological impact it likely had on you. In terms of deterring future incidents, it seems improbable you'll ever encounter such a grotesque and deeply upsetting situation again. As the judge spoke these words, his gaze shifted disdainfully toward my wife, who was sitting among the spectators. She immediately recoiled, sinking lower into her seat under the weight of his judgment. What stood out most was her isolation. She sat alone, without a single friend to offer her support. From snippets of conversation I'd overheard during my solitary hours in confinement, it was clear her social circle had largely abandoned her. My case had dominated the national spotlight for weeks. Initially, the public's interest stemmed from the victim's celebrity status. Then, as details emerged about how certain public figures exploit their fame with little consequence, the case took on a broader social significance. Adding to the uproar was a crowdfunding campaign. It seemed several wealthy men, who had also been humiliated by my wife's lover, had contributed generously, pushing the fund into 6 figures before the general public joined in. The narrative of an ordinary man standing up to a powerful, arrogant figure struck a chord. Thousands of people, moved by the story, chipped in what they could. The fund's rapid growth ensured that the tale of my wife's betrayal and my actions remained in the public eye, fueling ongoing media coverage and conversations. Her reputation became a public punching bag. Lost in thought, I was startled back to reality by the sound of applause. The courtroom had risen to its feet as the judge left the bench. Glancing around, I noticed people smiling at me and giving me approving gestures. Turning to my lawyer, I asked, bewildered, "What just happened?" He grinned slightly. "The judge found you temporarily insane," he explained. "You're being released with time served and a 3-year probation. Congratulations, you're free." We shook hands as he guided me through the necessary steps for my release. Even the bailiff offered a handshake and a pat on the back before leaning in to quietly say, "Good on you, man. You've still got guts." He then escorted me out through a private exit, away from the horde of reporters waiting outside. Once in the open air, I thanked my lawyer, and we parted ways. As I rounded a corner near the courthouse steps, I noticed the media frenzy at the main entrance. On the far side of the steps, my victim was holding a press conference. Flanked by his lawyer, he spoke angrily into the microphones. "I plan to appeal today's outrageous verdict," he declared. "This is a blatant failure of justice. Pursuing relationships with married women is not a crime, and I will also file a civil lawsuit to clear my name." As I approached, camera operators began turning their lenses toward me. By the time I reached the same level of the steps as him, half of the cameras had shifted their focus. Standing next to him, our physical disparity was stark. He towered over me by nearly a foot and outweighed me significantly. Yet as I moved closer, he instinctively stepped back, lost his footing, and fell to the ground. Embarrassed, he scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with humiliation. I offered him a wide smile. "Good luck with your appeal and lawsuit. Whether you win or lose, at least I'll still have my dignity." His face darkened, and the next day's headlines reveled in the moment. Variations of "husband stands tall" and "underdog triumphs over fallen star" dominated the news. The publicity gave my GoFundMe campaign another boost, enabling me to secure a top-tier civil lawyer to address any potential legal challenges. However, months passed, and no legal action materialized. The reason became clear one evening. While enjoying a beer at my local bar, a large man loomed over me. Without turning, I heard him say he belonged to a support group for men who'd been wronged by their spouses. He explained that members of their group had spoken with my victim, persuading him to abandon any lawsuits. I didn't ask for details. His sheer size made it easy to imagine the nature of their discussion. I offered to buy him a drink, but he declined. Thanking him, I watched as he left, grateful for the unexpected allies I'd gained. As for my victim, his career spiraled into oblivion. Once a celebrated athlete, he was quietly dropped from the major leagues and relegated to the minors, where his income plummeted by over 90%. His name surfaced in the media only once more during a late-night interview with washed-up celebrities. A friend recorded the segment for me. On screen, he bemoaned his downfall, attributing it to lower testosterone levels that had sapped his strength and motivation. His diminished stature became a running joke among fans and opponents alike. After slapping, rather than punching, an opposing player during a heated exchange, he was suspended. Shortly thereafter, he was caught using banned supplements and permanently banned from professional sports. His name faded into obscurity, remembered only as a cautionary tale of hubris and infidelity. Luna fared no better. Once the subject of sympathy from a small circle, she was quickly abandoned as public scorn grew. The media cast her as the epitome of treachery. Attempts to relocate were thwarted by my lawyer, who ensured that our children remained close to me. Her struggles with alcohol deepened, estranging her further from child services. One night, after our children reported her erratic behavior, the police intervened. Her arrest for DUI became yet another public embarrassment. My lawyer worked tirelessly to secure guardianship of the children for my parents. With the financial resources I now had, the court approved the arrangement swiftly. Luna's visits became sporadic as her drinking worsened. Eventually, she moved away, reduced to sending birthday and holiday cards that the children barely acknowledged. As for me, my unexpected fame brought attention from many women, but I avoided fleeting connections. Eventually, I met someone truly remarkable. She was a Ukrainian refugee who had fled the war with her children and nieces after losing her sister and brother-in-law. Her strength and kindness left me in awe. Most importantly, she loved me for who I was, not for the notoriety attached to my name. Late at night, she would often tease me with a soft laugh, saying, "I'm so glad you've still got your courage, Jeremy." My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.